Welcome to the People First podcast series, brought to you exclusively by Sit Down Events. I'm Damien Swaby, your local friendly podcast host for this episode of the brand new podcast series. People First is dedicated to getting to know our business leaders, what's behind the title, finding out what sets them apart, what makes them tick, understanding how they continue to survive and thrive, and what it means in today's world. Each episode will feature a different leader sharing their story and the lessons they've learned. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Today on People First, I speak to Altaf Jasnaik, a seasoned strategy and transformation leader with 20 years of international experience managing strategy, marketing and innovation functions for MNCs and large family-run businesses. He created the award-winning company Management, which is a tried and tested process that takes away the guesswork and anxiety from strategy, innovation, organizational disruptiveness by making them scientifically repeatable. On today's episode, we discuss your children being a reflection of the choices you make, people who are no longer attached to their passions in life, and why Prophet Muhammed is such an integral part of his life. We also discuss his hope that his children take the ability to observe, think, and then dream for equality for everyone around the world. All of this and more on People First. Altaf, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I've said a lot about you in the intro for the podcast, but please do tell us, where did you grow up and how did that affect who you've became?
Thank you very much, Damien, for having me. I've been looking forward to this as well. I was born and brought up in Dubai, in the UAE, and I've seen it become what it has become over the years by challenging the status quo and continually aiming for and achieving the future, making it possible within the limited capabilities and capacity that the leaders had. And I think just being in that environment where more than 200 nationalities live together, thrive together, compete and win together, I think was the setting for a lot of the learning that I had. And yes, definitely, having lived there, having seen the city become what it has become today, has had a huge impact on who I am. And I don't think about it as much, but given the question that you've had, it's really made me think, and I owe a lot to Dubai and the UAE and the leaders and how they have always strived for creating the future that everybody else wishes to have.
And when you say Dubai and the leaders, is there anything in particular you owe a lot to them about?
Coming from a family that migrated from parts of India from my father's side and from parts of Africa from my mother's side, we had an idea of what the world was while we were growing up. Back home in India or in Zanzibar, we knew exactly what was it that our families were going through, and what was it that they were seeing as their life and their current and their future. And in a nation which had no oil, Dubai as a city was able to create continually a vision for itself that was so far ahead that it was worth admiring from the outside as much as it was worth creating on the inside. And that behavior of dreaming as big as you can and then worrying about how do you go about achieving it was the lesson. I haven't received any grants or handouts from anybody as such, but just being able to see somebody do it in front of your own eyes and continually have people over a span of 2-3 decades as I was growing up see that the rest of the world is interested in this particular place for the disruption that it's causing, that itself was a huge lesson for us. And again, the leaders, the rulers are not democratically elected. They are uh, it's basically a kingdom of sorts where you have a ruler, a ruling family, and the ruling family are not as distant from the masses as they are in other parts of the world. You would see rulers in the mosques for Friday prayers. You'd see them in malls. You see them driving around the city. You can have a council with them. They have their weekly majlis, which is a sitting where they invite people to come and have discussions with them. Uh, just seeing that kind of leadership in action, I think, is what I meant by I owe them a lot, because it taught me that if I needed to be a leader like them, and if I wanted to achieve everything that I think I deserve, I need to be able to dream it myself, b keep myself as grounded as possible so that I can see it being built ground up, because you need to be sweating and bleeding in the trenches as you build that future. And I think humility and vision are two of the biggest things that I was able to learn, because I saw it happen in front of me.
That's amazing that you were able to overcome those challenges and be able to think like that. Everyone has challenges when they try to overcome something new. How did you overcome being dyslexic in an age where it wasn't appreciated or understood as it is now?
Thank you. That is the deep end of of my upbringing, and I think I was just lucky, fortunate enough to have parents that never saw that as a shortcoming. It wasn't clinically diagnosed until it was already quite late, but just to have parents that appreciated that I had challenges reading, I had challenges comprehending letters and how is it that they phonetically came together to become words, wasn't as big a challenge as my teachers or my classmates made it sound, as much as my parents, showed me that it wasn't. So the fact that they were able to appreciate my other skills, so to say, my ability to be able to reason, uh, and to be able to predict things based on just my observation skills, and them encouraging me to, overcome the struggle by putting in my best effort and not worrying about the results as long as I put in my best. All of these were bits and pieces that helped me from an overall encouragement perspective. But I think the biggest challenge with dyslexia is not the ability to be able to keep up with what's being taught at school. It's the stigma that comes with it, because everybody else ridicules you for not being at on par with them, at the same level as them. And perhaps the one of the things that my mother talks a lot about is that I was very open and extroverted, and again, just fortunate enough not to have gone into a shell because of what was happening around me, but instead being able to take my disability, and instead of making it one of the things that made me stand out like a sore thumb, instead trying to make it what made me extraordinary. So I took a disability, and instead of hiding behind it, at a very young age, I chose to revel in it, if I may say so. And as a child, you don't understand those choices, and I think it comes down to good parenting, and it comes down to your parents and your siblings just encouraging you through it. But yeah, if it were today, and given the kind of diagnosis that is available for identifying this as a challenge and the support that comes along with it, if I had all of these things, I don't think I would be where I am right now, because I wouldn't then receive all of these additional bits of nurturing and parenting that would help me excel at other things that I was I was supposedly good at, and I had to discover because I wasn't good at reading.
But you've suffered discrimination and intolerance in education and through school. But throughout your own career, have you suffered any intolerance or discrimination?
I like your choice of words. Um, it wouldn't be called life, would it, Damien, if there wasn't any discrimination? If everything was, according to our plan, it would probably be a TV show where we were scripted into something, and nobody else is born and lives in Truman's world. So yeah, I've faced my fair share of challenges all throughout my career. Every organization I've worked in, I've been able to grow rapidly, to higher levels of power and control, only to be told that I was either too young for the position that I believed I should have had, or of being the wrong race and color, or not having enough experience leading others that were twice my age, for example, etc., etc. There have been all sorts of challenges throughout my life, but I think the more important thing is, did that hold me back? Not really. I decided to do what I thought was best by my employers, up until the point where I realized that I have a view of where the future could be, where there isn't scope for discrimination, there isn't scope for any intolerance, because we are not recognized by the schools that we've attended, or the degrees that we have on our walls. We are rather recognized by who we are as people. One of the things that I'm working on for nearly a decade now is the eradication of the CV, because I think that it's an obsolete process. It's as obsolete as our current education system, because we refer to what is written on a piece of paper and rely on recommendation and references that come along with it, and we believe that's the way to hire people. That's what is the root cause for discrimination, because you hire somebody believing what they are on paper, only to realize that they are made for compliance, which is where they won't challenge you. Or people like me who come in, challenge the status quo, disrupt it to the point where we deserve bigger and better positions, only to be told that this wasn't written in your CV. We didn't expect you to shoot out of the graph so quickly. So I have had plenty of these opportunities. I don't call them discrimination anymore. I look at them as opportunities to reflect, to use my observation skills, to use my ability to reason, and to create a future, and at least start dreaming of a future that I think is worth creating, even if it were just with my own hands.
So what would you use to replace the CV?
If I told you that would be the £1 million solution that we are, well, the £1.8 million solution that we're trying to create. Let me just help you with, or let me help the listeners with what is it that we are imagining of the future, and how we see the future without a CV. Imagine if the next opportunity that existed for your skills and your aptitude and ability and your education to be applied in today's world. And by today's world, I mean a post-COVID distance learning, distance working, work from home world. What really stops us from getting onto a call like this, on the other end of the world, but distance by not the physical distance between us, but the distance between the nose and the lens that sits in front of us. If we look at this world, all we need is for us to be able to identify the need for where a specific set of skills are required and where the skills sit anywhere in the world, and then to be able to measure them and connect the two dots with a bridge, which is the program that we're working on, which basically helps connect the right talent with the right opportunity, without them having to apply for it, without an organization having to look for it, because the world of talent that we've seen uh, wake up, from the slumber that we've been suffering for the last 100 years is huge. If you look at the number of people that have become the so-called wave of the Great Resignation, it's millions of people. Just to throw some numbers at you, in America alone, in the first 4 months of 2021, there were more than 20 million people that were quitting work every month. Not over the first 4 months, every month. The number of people that
Wow.
were jobless, according to the ILO, in 2021 alone was 100 plus million people, of which nearly 60 to 70% were jobless by choice, because they realized the world that we exist in today isn't balanced in their favor. Uh, if we go back to 100, 200 years, we weren't necessarily working 8 to 5. We were working based on the specific skills that we were acquired from our lineage, our families, so we could convert those skills into results for somebody, and we would then enjoy the seasonality of our work and the seasonality of our neighborhoods and the world around us. We were writers and artists, and we would travel. That's all gone. It's all gone because we are now 8 to 5ers or 9 to 5ers, working 5 days a week, and then struggling to make time for our passion and our family over the remaining 2 days. And that's not the world that we are used to. So if we want to create a world where we can go back to us being able to express ourselves artistically and poetically and culturally, on top of us having time for our families and our health, I think that future has to be a CV free world, where you don't have to go through an education system that requires you to be able to demonstrate where you've studied, to be able to demonstrate what is it that you can do for somebody once given the opportunity. Instead, bring the opportunity right in the front, and then base the entire education system based on the requirements of the market today, requirements of the market in the future, so that we could teach children at school from the age of 5 to 15 the skills that are needed to be able to create results as soon as they're out of university. We know too many people that have gone through the education system that we live and survive today, to only eventually end up doing a job in our 20s and 30s that we hate towards our 40s, only to realize that it's too late now to do anything else. And then we feel like we are stuck in there because we've got commitments and we've got mortgages and we've got all of these other things that life brings along with it, and we have no time for our passion. How many people have killed their passion, murdered their passion this way? I know too many to even recall. So that future, I think, is not going to be possible just by eliminating the CV. It requires a whole lot of other investments, a whole lot of other collaboration to be made as well. And that's the future we're working on right now.
And when you said people are no longer attached to their passions, they get to go through their 20s, 30s, 40s. They've got a mortgage, got kids and other responsibilities. And I think potentially they are so far removed from their 20s now, some of their passions have died a slow, poisonous death. So it's hard for them to get into it rather than jumping in with both feet like they did when they were 19, 20, 21, etc. because of what they've been through for the last 20 years or so. What type of person do you think has the character traits that would help the world and help the future?
The definition of a person's character and his or her traits have really changed over the last 15, 20 years, because each of us has a certain perspective of life, and we believe that we are a creature of habit, and we behave based on what we think is the reality, or what we think is the world woven around our eyes. And I think if you look at character traits and what people believe are character traits, that's a whole different science as opposed to how they behave. because sometimes we are a sum total of what other people expect of us as opposed to who we really are. So I look at characters and character traits based on observed cognition based conscious behavior and the observed subconscious behavior. And between the two of these, I think there are a few that I really admire. For example, a person's ability to question and observe. I find that very intriguing when people have the ability to, just say, hang on, this isn't adding up, because the math is too simple. This doesn't work this way. There has to be another perspective. There has to be something else. Anybody that has the ability to look at the status quo and say, no, this can't be right, there has to be something else, and can bring that observation to the fore and create an alternative reality for whatever exists in front of us. I think that is a character trait that I really admire in people, the ability to think and reason and observe. Other than that, I would say, of all the things that I have seen around myself and what I've really admired in the people that I follow and the mentors that I follow in my life, is striving for equality, striving for us to be able to exist as equals, and believing that everybody has a right and that everybody should be given a fair chance and an opportunity. So I love it when I see somebody standing up for the cause and the concern of the underrepresented. I love it when let me put it this way. I really find myself energized when I am fighting for equality, and I admire that in others as well.
If Prophet Muhammad wasn't in your life, how different a person do you think you would be?
Interesting. I would have relied on my ability to observe, and I would have found somebody else that has championed a cause that resonated with me. I think as a child, there's only so much that you can pick from the real world and what's going on around you. And what matters to a grown-up might be worthless to a child. But as a child, what I learned and I saw being practiced as a behavior that the Prophet Muhammad had resonated with me as much as it resonates with me now. And there are various other people that have done enough to become, legends and lessons that can be taught to children as well. And if not him, there would have been somebody else, I guess. If nobody else, I would have followed in the footsteps of the man I admire the most after Prophet Muhammad, which is my dad, who tries to live by the principles that he has learned. And I wouldn't have fallen so far away from where Prophet Muhammad is, because I believe my dad has brought up a son that found it worthy of putting all his energy towards equality, putting all his energy towards making sure that everybody else is able to thrive.
And your father, what did he work as?
He is in his late 70s and he's still working in the same business that he's been working for the last 49 years. And he works in personnel relations and public relations. So he is, I believe, if there is an extrovert in me, it's in the genes that I have been gifted through him. He is the liveliest person in the room, in any room, and he's the one that everybody finds themselves naturally gravitating towards. and he has the brightest smile that can light up anybody's day. But he also has a stern side to him that is very principle driven, and that's why he's still required by this large business that he works for in Dubai, which is why, regardless of his age, regardless of what the requirements of the land stipulate, he's still there within this job because of everything he is.
You obviously have had some great days with your father as a kid. Can you give us an example of what a great day would look like, maybe at home or even going to work with him for a day?
I clearly remember uh, something that must have happened when I was 12, 13, perhaps, where uh, I think I was being very, very nosy and asking about what is that happens at work. And it was almost a punishment that I was asked to join him to work. Uh, and I saw back then, for this large organization with thousands of people that were there, uh, everybody needed him because he worked for the personnel department. Uh, but he treated everybody the same, regardless of whether it was the owner of the business, his boss, his peer, uh, juniors, absolute nobodies, strangers, and they were all treated the same way. And I had seen that in my life as a child, seeing it from a parent, but to see him behave that way at work as well, to be in his chair and earn the respect and admiration from everybody equally, set set the benchmark for me as well. That your humility and your actions really make who you are. So I'll never forget that day. Thank you for bringing that up. It's such a beautiful memory.
And your own children, are you taking them to work at all? Are they too young, or is that something you can do?
No, they have. I have two teenagers and a 10-year-old. So I quit the corporate world 10, 11 years ago, and I started my own learning center to help the differently gifted children, and to help those who wanted to excel in life and not wait for higher education. And for the longest of time, for my two eldest, that was almost an extension of their home, because because my wife was there as well, running the center with me, and they've been seeing what's going on. And now that I've moved to the UK and I'm working on my book, and a lot of my work is through this home office. They've seen what work is like, and they've seen what it means to have a balanced work life. And this is, if anything, what they are aspiring to as well. You see, if you look at the number of people that have created startups that have become unicorns and are succeeding, it's a large number of them that are right now in their 20s.
Mm.
And that's because they've seen their families and their parents suffer the death of their ideas, because they didn't have the opportunity to give it the light of day. And it's what I'm doing is not disruptive, it's not radical, it's just good, sensible parenting that others have seen as well. And a lot of them have empowered their children through whatever education system they've gone through to be able to think for themselves and choose not to get onto the bandwagon to get a job and then aim for a certain life which is debt ridden and is based on chasing your dreams that everybody else believes is a part of your dream. Getting into mortgages and homes and speedy cars and travel when it's not needed. And just saying, okay, I can delay all of that by first working on my idea. And if anything, I'd love to give that to my kids as well. And I work very hard to ensure that I teach them that lesson by living it, rather than just parroting it.
So what does a healthy work-life balance look like to you? Can you describe that to us?
I think to understand that, we need to take a slight perspective view of what does balance mean, or what does balance create. Balance is when you're happy in the moment and you leave a trail of happiness, and what you have ahead of you is also happiness. It doesn't make sense if what you're doing is earning you billions of dollars, but it doesn't make you happy. If it doesn't give you a good night's sleep, that happiness, that money is of no use at all. So balance comes from a place of happiness. But happiness has three types. There's, as Tony Shea has eloquently put in his book, happiness comes from acts of pleasure, which is short-lived happiness based on external stimulus that gives you a certain happiness for a specific amount of time. But as soon as the stimulus goes away, the happiness fades away. So you could be a rock star and have a miserable life. That's not work-life balance, according to me. And then there's the life that the lie that we've been taught, which is to run behind our passion, to work for our passion, because that is a different kind of happiness. That's a slightly longer lasting happiness than the pleasure, because it doesn't require external stimulus. It comes from within you. But you know what, Damien, that kind of happiness drains you, because you've got to work against all odds to do something that you have found yourself passionate about. Not necessarily that is something that everybody else around you believes in as well. So to be able to be good at something that you have managed to eventually, through an education system, after 20 years of your life, align yourself to, and then having to spend 8 to 5 every day for say 10, 15, 20 years so that you can follow your passion is a very energy consuming and very exhausting kind of happiness. It doesn't leave you with any energy at the end of the day, and there comes a time when you say, I'm going to pull the plug on this, it's not working out, and then you try to do something else. So that isn't the right kind of work-life balance either. But there is this purpose-driven happiness which lasts the longest. It releases the right kind of chemicals. We've got serotonin and oxytocin, and we've got dopamine, and we've got all of these beautiful little chemicals that the pituitary gland releases as we experience different things. And the longest lasting happiness comes from being aligned with your purpose. So to me, somebody who has been able to align himself or herself based on their purpose in an area where they are very passionate to work in, and they have the pleasure of delivering happiness every day, is absolute alignment of happiness. And to me, that is 100% work-life balance. And while I have had to quit the corporate world over a decade ago to create this balance for myself, it won't come that easily for everybody else, because people still want to take that blue pill and stay asleep. They'd rather be happy knowing that there is a set of objective, controllable measures that they can survive by, rather than an unknown set of challenges that they can challenge themselves, excuses that they can overcome themselves to create a whole new radical life. And it's the differences between those who are still choosing to live this false life and trying to create a balance, only to realize that the only way out is by completely waking up and doing something else. Again, people like me have been studying this for a decade. The 2000 dot-com bust, the 2004 market crash, 2008, 2014, every market crash since 1637 all the way till 2019 has only shown an awakening amongst people, where they've said, this is, I can't live my life this way. And that awakening is leading to people realizing that this isn't what we were built for as a species. This isn't where we find the most amount of happiness, because what good is that work life balance that you can only achieve in your 60s, when you have no energy left in your spine, and the ability to reason and the willingness to fight for a cause is no longer there. So, how many Colonel Sanders have created KFCs over the last 50 years? Hardly any. Why is it that all the new businesses are coming from the brilliant but fertile minds of the young? Because there is this awakening, and it's happening. It's happening. It will take some time. It will take a lot of people like me and yourself to tell these stories, to promote and propagate these concerns, and a day will come, Damien. Mark my words, a day will come.
But you mentioned the day you had with your father at work. I could see how much joy it brought to your face. So let's just imagine in 20 years' time, that question is put forward to one of your children. What would be the ideal answer you would like them to give?
I think it's fighting for what is good. If I want to be remembered fondly by my children, and I say this with a lot of endearment for the rest of the world out there, but my children are very dear to me, like my wife is, like my parents are, like my siblings are. This is my inner circle. And if my inner circle were to remember me by something, I want them to remember me as somebody that dreamt of good for all, equality for all. And I want them to remember that. I want them to make that their life's mission as well. I want them to make that their purpose in whatever areas that they excel in, so that they can then take that little lesson and apply it to their lives and change the world in that many more ways, because there's only so much that you can do. One of the things that I've had to do to get where I am is to realize that I can't do everything on my own, that I might be able to do quite a few things, but I'm only great at one thing. So while I've been championing this cause of transformation and disruption proofing and creating a future of equality for all, if they can take the ability to observe, think, and then dream for equality and good for everyone around the world, I want that to be the big lesson that they take back from their fathers, from their day at their father's office.
Yeah, great. I really like that. You gave a really good answer, and I appreciate it. Altaf, thank you so much for coming on. You've certainly given me a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Thank you, Damien, and best of luck. I think what you're doing is it has the power to change the world. So may the force be with you, my friend.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of People First, and we look forward to you joining us next week.